The silver stars on General Morrison's uniform caught the fluorescent lights of the community center as he rose from his chair. The room fell silent, 200 pairs of eyes following his movement as he straightened to attention. Then, in one fluid motion that seemed to suspend time itself, he brought his hand to his forehead in the most perfect military salute Marcus had ever witnessed. The same parents who had spent years telling their son he would never amount to anything sat frozen in their seats, watching a decorated 4-star general honor the young man they had dismissed as worthless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Williams had grown accustomed to the weight of disappointment in his parents' voices. At 26, he had endured a lifetime of being measured against his older brother Derek and found lacking in every comparison. While Derek excelled in academics, starred in varsity sports, and eventually landed a prestigious job at their father's accounting firm, Marcus struggled with dyslexia, preferred solitary activities, and had chosen a path that his family viewed as beneath their social standing. The Williams family had built their reputation in the affluent suburb of Westfield on traditional markers of success. Robert Williams ran the most profitable accounting firm in 3 counties, while his wife Patricia served on the boards of multiple charity organizations and prided herself on hosting the neighborhood's most elaborate social gatherings. Their sprawling colonial home on Maple Ridge Drive served as a testament to their achievements, with its perfectly manicured lawns and imported marble foyer that welcomed guests with an unmistakable message of prosperity. Derek had fulfilled every expectation placed upon him. He graduated summa cum laude from Princeton, earned his CPA certification before his 23rd birthday, and seamlessly transitioned into the family business where he quickly proved his worth by securing several high-profile corporate clients. His engagement to Amanda Richardson, daughter of the district attorney, had been celebrated as the perfect union of 2 prominent families. The local newspaper had featured their engagement announcement with a full-color photograph that Patricia had framed and displayed prominently in the living room. Marcus, however, had chosen a different trajectory. Despite his parents' protests and threats to withdraw financial support, he had enlisted in the Army immediately after high school graduation. The decision had been met with weeks of heated arguments, slammed doors, and ultimatums that ultimately went unheeded. Patricia had initially refused to tell her friends where her younger son had gone, creating elaborate stories about gap-year travel programs and delayed college admissions. The truth was that Marcus had found his calling in military service. Despite struggling with traditional academic subjects throughout his school years, he discovered an aptitude for logistics, strategic planning, and leadership that flourished in the structured environment of military life. His dyslexia, which had been a source of shame and frustration in civilian classrooms, became manageable with proper accommodations and understanding supervisors who valued his unique problem-solving abilities. During his 8 years of service, Marcus had been deployed 3 times to conflict zones where his skills in supply chain management and personnel coordination had earned him rapid promotions and commendations from superior officers. He had received the Bronze Star for his actions during a particularly dangerous mission in Afghanistan, where his innovative approach to resource distribution had saved dozens of lives when their forward operating base came under sustained attack.
And the couple's plans for expanding the accounting firm. Marcus's stories about his deployments, the soldiers under his command, and his growing expertise in military logistics were met with polite disinterest at best and thinly veiled disdain at worst. The breaking point had come during his most recent leave, 6 months before his scheduled discharge. Marcus had returned to Westfield with news that he had been accepted into an elite military leadership program that would fast-track his promotion to officer status. The program represented the culmination of years of hard work and demonstrated exceptional potential for advancement within the military hierarchy. Instead of celebration, the announcement had triggered the most devastating confrontation of Marcus's life. Patricia had been entertaining members of her book club when he arrived home, and the conversation had naturally turned to their children's accomplishments. When Marcus mentioned his acceptance into the leadership program, expecting at least acknowledgement of this significant milestone, his mother's response had been swift and cutting. "Marcus, dear, you need to understand that what you do isn't really a career in the way Derek's is," she had said, her voice carrying the patronizing tone usually reserved for correcting children. "It's admirable that you found something you enjoy, but it's not the kind of achievement that earns real respect. Anyone can follow orders and march around in uniform." The book club members had shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, but Patricia had continued, seemingly oblivious to the pain she was inflicting on her son. "We've tried to be supportive, but you have to realize that your father and I have certain expectations. We've worked hard to build our reputation in this community, and we need our children to contribute to that legacy, not detract from it." Robert had nodded in agreement from his position behind the newspaper, adding his own perspective without looking up from the financial pages. "Your mother's right, son. The military is fine for people who don't have other options, but you come from a family that's built something meaningful. It's time you started thinking about your real future instead of playing soldier." The words had struck Marcus with the force of a physical blow. 8 years of dedication, sacrifice, and genuine accomplishment had been dismissed as playing soldier by the people whose approval he had unconsciously continued to seek, despite years of evidence that it would never come. The Bronze Star Medal in his dresser drawer, the commendations from commanding officers, the lives he had helped save through his expertise, all of it reduced to a childish game in his parents' estimation. Derek had been present for this conversation, having stopped by to discuss business matters with their father. Rather than defending his younger brother or acknowledging Marcus's achievements, Derek had chosen to remain silent, tacitly supporting their parents' position through his inaction. This betrayal had perhaps stung more than their parents' direct criticism, as Marcus had held on to hope that his brother might eventually recognize the validity of his chosen path. The conversation had ended with Patricia delivering what she clearly intended as the final word on the subject. "Marcus, you're 26 years old, and it's time you stopped seeking attention through these dramatic career choices. The military doesn't teach you anything valuable for the real world. When you're ready to grow up and contribute something meaningful to this family, we'll be here to help you get started in a proper profession." That night, Marcus had packed his belongings and left the house on Maple Ridge Drive for what he suspected might be the final time. The drive back to his base had been punctuated by a profound sense of liberation mixed with deep sadness. He realized that he had been carrying the weight of his parents' disapproval for so long that its sudden absence felt almost disorienting. The months that followed had been transformative for Marcus in ways his family could never have anticipated.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The constant pressure to justify his choices to people who would never understand them, he threw himself into his work with renewed energy and focus. His performance in the leadership program exceeded all expectations, earning him recognition as one of the most promising young officers in his class. His commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Chen, had taken particular notice of Marcus's abilities and had recommended him for a special assignment that would utilize his unique combination of logistical expertise and leadership potential. The assignment involved coordinating relief efforts in disaster-stricken areas, a role that required both military precision and humanitarian sensitivity. During this period, Marcus had also formed meaningful relationships with fellow service members who understood and valued his contributions. Among these was Sergeant First Class Maria Rodriguez, a logistics specialist whose own family had initially struggled to understand her military career choice. The friendship that developed between them was built on mutual respect and shared experiences of proving themselves in environments where their worth was measured by competence and character rather than social expectations. Maria had grown up in a working-class family in Phoenix, where her decision to enlist had been met with pride rather than disappointment. Her parents, both of whom had worked multiple jobs to support their children's educations, viewed military service as an honorable path that offered opportunities for advancement and service to country.
Through conversations with Maria, Marcus began to understand that his parents' attitudes were not universal, and that respect could be earned and freely given in environments where genuine merit was valued. The contrast between Maria's family support and his own parents' dismissal became even more apparent when Maria invited Marcus to spend a weekend with her family during a brief leave. The Rodriguez household welcomed him with warmth and genuine interest in his military career. Maria's father, a retired construction worker, asked detailed questions about Marcus's responsibilities and listened with obvious pride as his daughter explained the complexity and importance of military logistics operations. This experience had been revelatory for Marcus, demonstrating that respect was not something that had to be begged for or earned through conformity to others' expectations. In the right environment, with people who valued character and competence over social status, respect could be mutual and freely given. As his discharge date approached, Marcus had been offered the opportunity to extend his service and accept a promotion to lieutenant, a recognition of his exceptional performance and leadership potential. The decision had been easy to make. He signed the extension papers without consulting his family, knowing that their input would only be destructive to a choice that felt absolutely correct for his life and career. The notification of his promotion had arrived at his parents' house despite his efforts to redirect all military correspondence to his base address. Patricia had called him immediately, her voice tight with frustration and embarrassment. "Marcus, we received some official-looking mail addressed to you. I don't understand what this promotion business means, but people in the neighborhood are starting to ask questions about your situation." Her primary concern, as always, was how his choices reflected on the family's reputation rather than any recognition of his achievement. The conversation had been brief, with Marcus explaining that he would be remaining in the Army and would no longer be using their address for any official correspondence. Patricia's response had been predictably focused on social appearances rather than her son's success. "Well, I hope you understand that this makes things very awkward for us," she had said. "People expect our children to follow certain paths, and we can't keep explaining why you've chosen to stay in the military when you could be doing something respectable."
The call had ended with the familiar refrain that Marcus had heard throughout his adult life, that his choices were somehow a reflection of personal failure rather than conscious decisions made by a capable adult. The promotion to lieutenant, which represented years of hard work and exceptional performance, had been dismissed as another embarrassment requiring explanation to their social circle. Marcus had shared the details of this conversation with Maria, who had listened with a mixture of sympathy and anger on his behalf. Her own recent promotion to Sergeant First Class had been celebrated with a family barbecue where her parents had invited neighbors and relatives to share in their pride. The contrast between their experiences had highlighted the toxicity of Marcus's family dynamic and reinforced his decision to create distance from their destructive influence. The months following his promotion had been among the most fulfilling of Marcus's life. His new responsibilities included overseeing logistics operations for a multi-state region, coordinating with civilian agencies during natural disasters, and mentoring junior officers who were beginning their own military careers. The work was challenging and meaningful, providing daily confirmation that his skills and dedication were making a tangible difference in the world. His expertise had also begun to attract attention from senior leadership within the military hierarchy. Colonel Chen had recommended him for several high-profile assignments, and his innovative approaches to resource management had been studied and implemented by other units. The respect he commanded from peers and superiors alike stood in stark contrast to the dismissive treatment he received from his family. During this period, Marcus had also begun to understand that his parents' behavior was part of a larger pattern of conditional love and acceptance that had shaped his entire childhood. Their approval had always been contingent on conformity to their expectations rather than recognition of his individual strengths and interests. Derek's success in meeting these expectations had earned him unconditional support, while Marcus's different path had been met with consistent disapproval. This realization had been both painful and liberating. Painful because it confirmed that his parents' love came with strings attached, but liberating because it freed him from the exhausting effort to earn approval that was fundamentally unavailable to him unless he abandoned his authentic self. The turning point had come when Marcus received notification that he had been selected to receive the Army Commendation Medal for his exceptional performance in coordinating disaster relief efforts following a series of devastating hurricanes. The ceremony was scheduled to take place at the Westfield Community Center, the same venue where his parents had hosted Derek's engagement party 3 years earlier. The irony of the location had not been lost on Marcus, but he had initially planned to attend the ceremony with Maria and a few close military friends, treating it as a professional milestone rather than a family event. However, as word of the ceremony spread through the Westfield community, it became impossible for his parents to ignore or dismiss the significance of the occasion. The local newspaper had contacted the Williams household for a story about the hometown hero receiving military honors, forcing Patricia to confront the reality that her son's achievements could no longer be hidden or minimized. The reporter's questions about Marcus's military career had revealed accomplishments that his parents had never bothered to learn about, creating an awkward situation where they struggled to provide basic information about their own son's service record. Faced with the prospect of public embarrassment if they failed to attend their son's military honors ceremony, Patricia and Robert had grudgingly agreed to be present. Derek and Amanda had also committed to attending, though their motivation appeared to be curiosity rather than genuine support. The ceremony itself had been planned by an Army detail with support from the Westfield Community Center management. As a relatively small affair, with Marcus receiving his commendation along with 3 other service members being honored for various achievements. However, the guest list had grown significantly as word spread through both military and civilian communities. Several of Marcus's former commanding officers had requested permission to attend, and the local veterans organization had announced their intention to participate in recognition of Marcus's service. Most significantly, General Morrison, the commanding officer for the entire southeastern region, had personally requested an invitation to the ceremony. The general's presence would transform what Marcus had envisioned as a modest recognition event into a formal military ceremony of considerable importance. As the ceremony date approached, Marcus found himself experiencing a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in his achievements was tempered by sadness that his family's attendance was motivated by social obligation rather than genuine recognition of his accomplishments. He had long since stopped expecting his parents to understand or value his military career, but their grudging presence at the ceremony served as a final confirmation of their conditional love. The morning of the ceremony, Marcus had prepared his dress uniform with the meticulous attention to detail that military life had ingrained in him. Each ribbon, each insignia, each element of his appearance reflected years of dedicated service and earned accomplishments. As he looked at himself in the mirror, he saw not the disappointing son his parents described, but a competent officer who had earned the respect of peers and superiors through merit and character. Maria had offered to accompany him to the ceremony as a gesture of friendship and support, understanding that the family dynamics would likely create emotional challenges despite the celebratory nature of the event. Her presence provided Marcus with a sense of stability and perspective, reminding him that respect and recognition were available in abundance among people who valued genuine achievement over social pretension. The community center had been transformed for the ceremony, with military precision evident in every detail of the arrangements. The American flag dominated the stage,
flanked by service flags and formal decorations that lent gravity and dignity to the proceedings. Rows of chairs had been arranged with mathematical precision, and a small platform had been erected where the honored service members would receive their commendations. As guests began to arrive, Marcus observed his parents from across the room, noting their obvious discomfort with the military atmosphere of the event. Patricia wore her most formal dress and jewelry, as if attending a social function where her appearance would be scrutinized and judged. Robert appeared stiff and awkward, clearly out of his element in an environment where his professional success carried no particular weight or recognition. Derek and Amanda arrived fashionably late, their entrance drawing attention from several guests who recognized them from various social events in the Westfield community. Their demeanor suggested they viewed the ceremony as an obligation to be endured, rather than a celebration to be enjoyed, and their conversations with other attendees focused on their own activities rather than Marcus's achievements. The contrast between his family's attitude and the enthusiasm of his military colleagues was striking. Fellow service members who had served with Marcus approached him throughout the pre-ceremony reception with genuine warmth and specific examples of how his expertise had impacted their own experiences. Stories were shared about successful missions, effective training programs, and innovative solutions that had originated with Marcus's leadership and vision. Colonel Chen arrived early and immediately sought out Marcus to express her pride in his achievements and her confidence in his continued success. Her presence at the ceremony, along with that of several other senior officers,
Underscored the significance of the recognition he was receiving and the high regard in which he was held within military leadership circles. As the formal ceremony began, Marcus took his place with the other honorees on the stage, looking out at an audience that represented two distinct worlds. On one side sat his family, fulfilling their social obligation with barely concealed reluctance. On the other side sat military personnel, veterans, and community members who genuinely understood and valued the significance of the honors being bestowed. The ceremony proceeded with traditional military precision, each element carefully choreographed to honor the service and sacrifice of the recipients. As Marcus's name was called and his achievements read aloud to the assembled crowd, he felt a profound sense of validation for the path he had chosen, despite years of family opposition and criticism. The citation for his Army Commendation Medal detailed his exceptional performance in coordinating multi-agency disaster relief efforts, his innovative approaches to resource management that had saved both lives and resources, and his outstanding leadership in training and mentoring junior personnel. The official language of the commendation provided a stark contrast to his parents' dismissive characterizations of his military service as meaningless or childish. But it was the unexpected presence of General Morrison that transformed the ceremony from a moment of personal validation into something far more significant. As the general rose from his seat in the audience, his movement commanded the immediate attention of everyone present. The sight of a 4-star general rising to his feet was impressive enough, but what followed exceeded everyone's expectations. General Morrison's salute was not merely a gesture of military courtesy, but a demonstration of profound respect for Marcus's service and achievements. The general held the salute for several seconds, his eyes locked on Marcus with an expression of genuine admiration and recognition. In that moment, the general was not simply acknowledging a junior officer's commendation, but honoring the dedication, sacrifice, and excellence that Marcus had demonstrated throughout his military career. The impact of the general's gesture rippled through the assembled crowd like a shockwave. Military personnel immediately understood the significance of such recognition from a senior commander, while civilian attendees were struck by the obvious respect and honor being demonstrated. The silence that followed was filled with the weight of recognition for service that transcended rank, social status, or family expectations. For Marcus, the general's salute represented the culmination of years of proving himself in an environment where merit and character were the only currencies that mattered. Every challenge overcome,
Every successful mission completed, every life touched through his service had led to this moment of ultimate professional recognition. As he returned the general's salute with equal precision and respect, Marcus felt the final remnants of his parents' disapproval lose their power over him. The young man who had left home 8 years earlier seeking to prove his worth had become an officer whose value was unquestioned by those qualified to judge military excellence. The ceremony concluded with traditional military honors, but the impact of General Morrison's gesture continued to reverberate through the community center as guests dispersed. Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers, fellow service members, and community leaders who wanted to express their recognition of his achievements and their pride in his service. His parents, meanwhile, remained seated in their chairs, visibly struggling to process what they had witnessed. The undeniable respect demonstrated by a 4-star general had shattered their carefully constructed narrative about their son's worthless military career. Patricia's face showed a mixture of confusion and embarrassment as she realized that her dismissive comments about her son's little military adventure.
Marcus's service had been revealed as profoundly ignorant in the face of such high-level military recognition. The transformation of their son from family disappointment to honored military officer had happened in full view of their social peers, many of whom had attended the ceremony and witnessed General Morrison's unprecedented display of respect. The implications for their carefully maintained social facade were profound and immediate. The aftermath of the ceremony had left the Williams family in an uncomfortable state of suspended reality. For 26 years, they had constructed their identity around the belief that true success could only be measured through traditional markers of civilian achievement. Marcus's military career had been relegated to an unfortunate detour that would eventually be corrected when he came to his senses and joined the family's respectable business world. General Morrison's salute had demolished that carefully maintained fiction in the span of 30 seconds. Patricia Williams found herself facing a social crisis unlike anything she had experienced in her decades of community leadership. The wives of prominent Westfield families had witnessed their neighbor's son receive the kind of recognition typically reserved for war heroes, and their questions about Marcus's military career revealed the depth of her own ignorance about her own child's accomplishments. Helen Crawford, whose husband served on the city council, had approached Patricia immediately after the ceremony with barely contained excitement about having such a distinguished military officer in their neighborhood. "Patricia, I had no idea Marcus had achieved such an impressive rank at such a young age," Helen had gushed, her voice carrying the kind of admiration usually reserved for celebrity encounters. "My brother served in the Air Force for 20 years and never received recognition from a general. You must be incredibly proud of his service record." The conversation had forced Patricia to confront the uncomfortable reality that she knew virtually nothing about her son's military achievements. She had spent so many years dismissing his career choice that she had never bothered to learn about promotions, deployments, or commendations that might have provided insight into his actual performance and recognition within military circles. When Helen asked specific questions about Marcus's service history, Patricia had been reduced to vague responses and promises to share more details at a later time. Robert Williams faced his own reckoning as news of the ceremony spread through the professional community. Several of his most important clients had military backgrounds, and word of Marcus's recognition by General Morrison had reached them through various channels. James Patterson, CEO of a major manufacturing company and a Vietnam veteran, had called Robert personally to express his admiration for Marcus's achievements and to share his own experiences with the significance of high-level military recognition. "Bob, you never mentioned that your son was making such an impressive mark in the Army," Patterson had said during what Robert had expected to be a routine business call. "General Morrison doesn't hand out personal recognition lightly. Your boy must be something special to catch that kind of attention from a 4-star. I'd like to meet him next time he's in town." The call had ended with Robert promising to arrange a meeting between Patterson and Marcus, despite having no idea whether his son would be willing to participate in such an encounter. The irony was not lost on him that his dismissal of Marcus's military career might actually damage his business relationships with clients who valued military service far more highly than he had ever imagined. Derek Williams experienced his own form of cognitive dissonance as he processed what he had witnessed at the ceremony.
Throughout their childhood and adult relationship, Derek had accepted their parents' narrative that his academic and business achievements represented superior life choices compared to his brother's military service.
Obvious respect demonstrated by senior military leadership toward Marcus had challenged this assumption in ways that Derek found deeply unsettling. Amanda Richardson had been particularly affected by the ceremony, having grown up in a family where public service was valued and respected. Her father's career in law enforcement had given her appreciation for the dedication required to excel in service-oriented professions, and she recognized the significance of General Morrison's gesture in ways that Derek seemed unable to grasp. Her comments during their drive home had been pointed and uncomfortable for her fiancé. "Derek, I think your family has seriously underestimated Marcus," she had said, her tone carrying implications that extended beyond simple acknowledgement of his military success. That general didn't just show up to a random ceremony. He came specifically to honor Marcus, which means your brother has achieved something remarkable that none of you seem to understand or appreciate. The community response to Marcus's recognition had been overwhelmingly positive, creating additional pressure on the Williams family to reconcile their private dismissal of his career with the public celebration of his achievements. The local newspaper had featured the ceremony prominently, with photographs of General Morrison's salute and detailed information about Marcus's service record that his own family was learning for the first time through media coverage. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, the Williams family's elderly neighbor and longtime friend, had been particularly vocal in her admiration for Marcus's accomplishments. She had known both boys since childhood and had often expressed concern about the family's treatment of Marcus compared to the praise lavished on Derek. The ceremony had vindicated her longtime belief that Marcus possessed qualities that were being overlooked and undervalued by his parents. "Patricia, I've watched that young man grow up, and I always knew he had something special," Mrs. Hayes had declared during an impromptu visit the day after the ceremony. "The way you've all talked about his military service as if it were some kind of failure has been heartbreaking to witness. Yesterday proved what I've always believed. Marcus has found exactly where he belongs, and he's excelling beyond anything Derek has achieved in that accounting office." The comparison between the two brothers had become a frequent topic of neighborhood conversation, with many residents expressing surprise at learning about Marcus's distinguished military career after years of hearing only about Derek's business success. The revelation that Marcus had received combat decorations, led relief efforts during natural disasters, and earned rapid promotions through exceptional performance had created a new narrative about the Williams family that contradicted everything Patricia had worked to establish. Marcus himself had returned to his base immediately following the ceremony, but the impact of his recognition continued to ripple through the Westfield community in his absence. Maria Rodriguez had remained in town for several additional days, staying with a local military family who had offered hospitality after learning about her friendship with the honored officer. Her presence had provided community members with opportunities to learn more about Marcus's military career from someone who had served alongside him and witnessed his capabilities firsthand. Maria's conversations with Westfield residents had revealed details about Marcus's service that painted a picture of exceptional dedication and competence. She described his leadership during deployment, his innovative approaches to complex logistical challenges, and his reputation among peers and superiors as an officer destined for continued advancement. These accounts stood in stark contrast to his family's characterization of his military service as aimless or temporary. "Marcus is one of the most respected officers I've ever served with," Maria had explained to a group of homecoming celebrants at the park.
A group of veterans at the local VFW hall. His expertise in logistics and resource management has literally saved lives during emergency operations. The recognition he received yesterday represents just a small portion of his actual contributions to military operations and disaster relief efforts. The veterans community had embraced Marcus as a hometown hero, with several older service members expressing pride in seeing a local young man achieve such distinction in military service. Their enthusiasm had created additional social pressure on the Williams family to acknowledge and celebrate Marcus's accomplishments, rather than continuing to dismiss them as inconsequential. Colonel Sarah Chen had also remained in Westfield for several days following the ceremony, using the opportunity to meet with local community leaders and discuss the partnership between military installations and civilian communities. Her presence had provided additional validation of Marcus's reputation within military circles, as she consistently described him as one of the most promising young officers under her command. During a breakfast meeting with the Westfield Chamber of Commerce, Colonel Chen had outlined Marcus's role in coordinating multi-agency disaster response efforts and his development of training programs that had been adopted by other military units. Her detailed description of his responsibilities and achievements had reached many of the same business leaders who moved in Robert Williams's professional circles, creating additional awareness of Marcus's actual military career rather than his family's distorted version. Lieutenant Williams represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking and dedicated leadership that makes our military effective, Colonel Chen had explained to the chamber members. His ability to coordinate complex operations while maintaining focus on both mission success and personnel welfare has made him invaluable in high-pressure situations. General Morrison's recognition yesterday reflects the esteem in which Marcus is held throughout our command structure. The contrast between Colonel Chen's professional assessment and the Williams family's dismissive attitude had become a topic of discussion among Westfield's business community. Several chamber members had approached Robert Williams in the days following the ceremony to express their admiration for Marcus and their surprise at learning about his distinguished service record. These conversations had forced Robert to confront the possibility that his understanding of military careers and their value might be fundamentally flawed. Back at his base, Marcus had been processing his own complex emotions about the ceremony and its aftermath. The recognition from General Morrison had been professionally gratifying and personally validating, but the presence of his family had reminded him of the emotional distance that had developed over years of mutual misunderstanding. He had hoped that witnessing such high-level military respect might prompt his parents to reconsider their assessment of his career choice, but their awkward behavior during and after the ceremony suggested that they remained fundamentally unchanged in their attitudes. Maria had provided Marcus with regular updates about the community response to his recognition, sharing details about conversations with Westfield residents and their growing awareness of his military achievements. Her reports had painted a picture of a hometown finally learning to appreciate a local success story that had been hiding in plain sight for years. The irony that strangers were celebrating his accomplishments while his own family struggled to acknowledge them had not been lost on Marcus. The most significant development in the aftermath of the ceremony had been an unexpected phone call from General Morrison's aide-de-camp, requesting a meeting to discuss Marcus's future career trajectory. The general's personal attention to a lieutenant's career path was unusual and suggested that Marcus had caught the eye of senior leadership in ways that
could dramatically impact his military future. Lieutenant Colonel Janet Phillips, serving as General Morrison's chief of staff, had explained during their phone conversation that the general was considering Marcus for assignment to his personal staff, a position that would provide unprecedented exposure to high-level military decision-making and strategic planning. The opportunity represented a career acceleration that most officers could only dream of achieving, particularly at Marcus's relatively junior rank. The general was impressed not only with your technical competence, but with your leadership presence during the ceremony, Lieutenant Colonel Phillips had explained. He believes you have the potential for rapid advancement and wants to provide you with experiences that will prepare you for senior leadership roles. This assignment would involve direct exposure to strategic planning at the regional level and coordination with civilian agencies during major operations. The opportunity had come with the requirement for security clearance upgrades and additional specialized training, but it represented exactly the kind of career advancement that validated every sacrifice Marcus had made in choosing military service over his family's preferred civilian career path. The general's personal interest in his development was a form of recognition that transcended the ceremony and suggested long-term confidence in his potential. Marcus had accepted the assignment without hesitation,
understanding that such opportunities were rare and typically available only to officers who had demonstrated exceptional promise over sustained periods. The decision would require relocation to General Morrison's headquarters, further distancing him geographically from his family, but providing access to career development opportunities that aligned perfectly with his professional goals and interests. News of Marcus's assignment to General Morrison's staff had reached Westfield through military channels, adding another layer to the community's growing recognition of his distinguished service. The local veterans organization had announced plans to establish an annual scholarship in Marcus's honor, recognizing his achievements and encouraging other young people to consider military service as a viable and respected career path. Patricia Williams had learned about the scholarship through her involvement with various community organizations, forcing her to confront the reality that her son was being celebrated by the very community where she had spent years minimizing his accomplishments. The scholarship announcement had been accompanied by detailed information about Marcus's service record, deployments, and commendations that revealed the depth of her ignorance about her own child's professional life. The psychological impact on the Williams family had been profound and lasting. Years of certainty about their values, priorities, and judgments had been undermined by a single ceremony and its aftermath. The comfortable narrative that had placed Derek's civilian success above Marcus's military service had been exposed as a fundamental misunderstanding of both careers and their relative value to society. Derek had begun questioning his own achievements in light of his brother's recognition, wondering whether his comfortable position in the family business represented genuine accomplishment or simply the fulfillment of expectations that required no particular courage or sacrifice. The comparison with Marcus's chosen path of military service, with its inherent risks and demands for excellence, had highlighted the security and predictability of Derek's civilian career in ways that made him uncomfortable. Amanda's evolving perspective on the two brothers had created tension in her relationship with Derek as she struggled to reconcile her admiration for Marcus's service with her commitment to a man who had passively participated in his family's dismissal of that very same service. Her father's law enforcement background had given her insight into the dedication required for public service
careers, and she found herself increasingly critical of the Williams family's materialistic value system. Robert Williams had initiated his own quiet investigation into military careers and their civilian equivalents, researching the responsibilities, requirements, and recognition associated with officer positions like those Marcus had achieved. His findings had revealed the depth of his ignorance about military service and the competitive nature of advancement within military hierarchies. The realization that Marcus's achievements represented genuine excellence in a demanding field had forced Robert to reconsider fundamental assumptions about career value and success metrics. The community's embrace of Marcus as a local hero had created additional pressure on the Williams family to publicly acknowledge and celebrate his achievements. Invitations to speak about their son's military service had begun arriving from various organizations, forcing Patricia to either decline opportunities or admit her lack of knowledge about Marcus's career. The social implications of either choice had been uncomfortable and embarrassing. Mrs. Hayes had become something of an unofficial spokesperson for Marcus's achievements, sharing details about his childhood character and early indicators of the leadership qualities that had served him well in military service. Her conversations with other community members had consistently highlighted the disconnect between Marcus's actual qualities and his family's assessment of his potential. The implicit criticism of the Williams family's parenting and values had been pointed and increasingly difficult to ignore. The local newspaper had followed up their initial ceremony coverage with a more comprehensive profile of Marcus's military career, including interviews with Colonel Chen and other military personnel who had served with him. The article had revealed details about his combat service, disaster relief coordination, and innovative training programs that painted a picture of sustained excellence and increasing responsibility. The publication had distributed throughout Westfield, ensuring that the entire community had access to accurate information about Marcus's achievements.
The veterans community had rallied around Marcus's recognition with enthusiasm that reflected their understanding of military culture and the significance of General Morrison's gesture. Their support had included plans for additional honors and recognition events, creating ongoing attention to Marcus's achievements that made it impossible for his family to return to their previous pattern of dismissing his military career. Colonel Chen had maintained contact with Marcus following the ceremony, providing mentorship and guidance as he prepared for his new assignment with General Morrison's staff. Her continued involvement had reinforced the military community's investment in Marcus's success and their recognition of his potential for continued advancement. The support network that had developed around his career had provided the kind of professional development and encouragement that had been absent from his family relationships. The scholarship announcement had generated additional media attention, with local television stations covering the story and interviewing community members about Marcus's impact on their understanding of military service. The coverage had consistently portrayed Marcus as a role model for young people considering military careers, emphasizing the opportunities for advancement and meaningful service that military life could provide. Marcus's former high school teachers had been interviewed for these stories, sharing memories of a student who had struggled with traditional academic measures but had demonstrated leadership qualities and determination that had predicted his later military success. Their perspectives had provided insight into the early indicators of Marcus's potential that his family had failed to recognize or value. The transformation of Marcus from family disappointment to community hero had happened with startling speed, leaving the Williams
family struggling to adapt to a new reality where their previous judgments had been revealed as fundamentally flawed. The social consequences of their years of dismissive comments about Marcus's military service had become increasingly apparent as community members expressed surprise and disapproval at learning about the family's attitude toward their distinguished son. Patricia's involvement with various charitable organizations had become complicated by questions about Marcus and her knowledge of his military service. Board meetings and social gatherings that had once focused on traditional community concerns now frequently included discussions of military families and the challenges faced by service members. These conversations had highlighted Patricia's ignorance about military life and her failure to support her own son's service in ways that reflected poorly on her character and values. The ripple effects of the ceremony had extended far beyond the immediate recognition of Marcus's achievements, creating a fundamental shift in community perceptions of the Williams family and their values. The comfortable social position that Patricia and Robert had built through business success and community involvement had been complicated by revelations about their treatment of their military son and their failure to recognize his distinguished service. As Marcus prepared for his new assignment with General Morrison's staff, the gap between his professional trajectory and his family's understanding of his career had become a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. The validation he had received from military leadership and community recognition had provided the confidence and perspective necessary to finally abandon his long-held hope for family approval and acceptance. The ceremony had marked not just a professional milestone, but a personal liberation from the expectations and judgments that had shaped his relationship with his family for decades. The young man who had left Westfield seeking to prove his worth had been replaced by an accomplished officer whose value was unquestioned by those qualified to assess military excellence. The recognition he had sought from his family had been found instead in the professional community that understood and valued his contributions. The future that lay ahead promised continued advancement and opportunities for meaningful service, supported by mentors and colleagues who recognized his potential and were invested in his success. The contrast with his family's dismissive attitude had become so stark that Marcus found himself grateful for the clarity it provided about where his loyalties and priorities should be directed. General Morrison's personal interest in Marcus's career development represented validation at the highest levels of military leadership, providing opportunities that would have been unimaginable to the young man who had enlisted 8 years earlier, seeking purpose and recognition. The path forward was clear and promising, supported by a community of military professionals who understood excellence and were committed to nurturing it wherever they found it.
The confrontation that would finally shatter years of willful ignorance came 3 weeks later, triggered by an event that made avoidance impossible. Patricia Williams had been hosting her monthly book club meeting when Margaret Foster, wife of the bank president, arrived with a copy of Military Times magazine featuring Marcus on the cover. The headline read, "Rising Stars, Young Officers Shaping Tomorrow's Military Leadership," and Marcus's photograph showed him in dress uniform, his chest displaying ribbons and decorations that his own mother couldn't identify. Margaret had placed the magazine on Patricia's coffee table with barely concealed excitement, her voice carrying the kind of breathless enthusiasm usually reserved for celebrity sightings. "Patricia, I had no idea your Marcus was featured in national military publications. My son-in-law is in the Air Force, and he says getting this kind of recognition means
Is being groomed for general officer rank. You must be beside yourself with pride." The other book club members had immediately abandoned any pretense of discussing their assigned novel, crowding around the magazine to examine the article about their neighbor's son. The detailed profile described Marcus's innovative logistic strategies, his role in developing new training protocols that had been adopted across multiple military branches, and his recent assignment to General Morrison's strategic planning staff. The article portrayed him as one of the military's most promising young leaders, with senior officers predicting rapid advancement and significant future responsibilities. Patricia had found herself in the agonizing position of learning about her son's achievements through a magazine article, while surrounded by women who expected her to provide insider details about his distinguished military career. Her attempts to deflect attention had been unsuccessful, as each revelation in the article prompted additional questions about Marcus's service history, his future plans, and the family's pride in his accomplishments. Helen Crawford had been particularly persistent in her questioning, having recently learned that her nephew was considering military service and wanting to understand the opportunities available through such a career path. "Patricia? The article mentions that Marcus has served in 3 combat zones and received multiple commendations for valor. When did he receive his Bronze Star? That's such an incredible honor for someone so young." The admission that she didn't know about her son's Bronze Star had created an uncomfortable silence that stretched across the elegantly appointed living room. The women who had gathered for years to discuss literature and community affairs found themselves witnessing a mother's public acknowledgement of her profound disconnection from her child's life and achievements. The social awkwardness had been palpable, with several members exchanging glances that conveyed their shock at Patricia's ignorance. Margaret Foster had attempted to smooth over the moment by suggesting that Patricia must be overwhelmed by the magnitude of Marcus's success, but her well-intentioned intervention had only highlighted the bizarre nature of a mother who knew nothing about her son's military decorations. The meeting had concluded earlier than usual, with book club members departing amid whispered conversations about the Williams family's peculiar dynamics. Robert Williams had arrived home that evening to find Patricia in a state of distress that bordered on panic. The magazine lay open on the kitchen counter, and she had spent hours reading and rereading the article about Marcus, trying to understand how the son she had dismissed as a failure had achieved such remarkable recognition. The detailed description of his responsibilities, the quotes from senior military leaders praising his capabilities, and the predictions about his future advancement had forced her to confront the possibility that her assessment of Marcus had been catastrophically wrong. "Robert, we need to talk about Marcus," she had announced as he entered the house, her voice carrying a tension he hadn't heard since Derek's college admission process. "I think we've made a terrible mistake." The conversation that followed had been unlike any discussion they had shared about their younger son. Patricia had read portions of the magazine article aloud, her voice breaking as she encountered descriptions of Marcus's courage during combat operations and his compassion in coordinating disaster relief efforts. The young man portrayed in Military Times bore no resemblance to the aimless disappointment they had constructed in their minds. Robert's response had been defensive initially, as he struggled to reconcile the magazine's portrayal with years of dismissive comments about Marcus's career choice. "This is just military propaganda," he had insisted, his voice lacking conviction. "They always make these things sound more impressive than they really are. It's
Like he's built a business or contributed something tangible to society. But even as he spoke the words, Robert had recognized their hollowness. The article had been written by civilian journalists for a military publication with a reputation for serious coverage of defense issues. The quotes from multiple senior officers, the specific examples of Marcus's innovations, and the detailed analysis of his career trajectory suggested substance rather than propaganda. Derek had joined the conversation when he arrived for a planned dinner, and his reaction to the magazine article had been complex and deeply uncomfortable. The brother who had accepted his parents' narrative about Marcus's inferior career choices found himself confronting evidence of achievements that far exceeded anything he had accomplished in his comfortable civilian position. Amanda had been particularly affected by the article, her law enforcement background providing her with insight into the significance of Marcus's military decorations and the competitive nature of advancement within military hierarchies. Her questions about specific aspects of Marcus's service had revealed the depth of the family's ignorance, while highlighting her own growing respect for his accomplishments. "Derek, your brother has achieved something extraordinary," she had said, her voice carrying implications that extended beyond simple acknowledgement of military success. The Bronze Star is awarded for heroic or meritorious achievement in a combat zone. This isn't just a participation trophy. It means Marcus risked his life to save others and was formally recognized for his courage. The evening had concluded with an uncomfortable family discussion about their treatment of Marcus and the possibility that their understanding of military service had been fundamentally flawed. Patricia had expressed regret about her dismissive comments, while Robert had struggled to admit that his business-focused worldview might have blinded him to other forms of meaningful achievement. Derek had been forced to confront the reality that his brother's career path required courage, dedication, and excellence that his own comfortable business position had never demanded. The comparison between their chosen paths had become unavoidable, with Marcus's willingness to serve in dangerous situations standing in stark contrast to Derek's risk-averse approach to life and career. The magazine article had also attracted attention from Robert's business associates, several of whom had contacted him to express their admiration for Marcus and their surprise at learning about his distinguished military career. James Patterson, the veteran CEO who had previously inquired about meeting Marcus, had called specifically to discuss the Military Times feature and to share his assessment of its significance. "Bob, that article about your son is remarkable," Patterson had said during their conversation. "I've been in business for 30 years, and I can count on one hand the number of people I've met who have achieved that level of recognition for genuine heroism and leadership. You've got a son who's destined for greatness, and I hope you realize how fortunate that makes your family." Similar calls had come from other clients and business contacts, forcing Robert to acknowledge that Marcus's military achievements carried weight and respect within the civilian business community that he had never recognized or appreciated. The consistent theme of admiration and respect had challenged his assumptions about the value of military service compared to business success. The community response to the magazine article had been equally overwhelming, with neighbors, local business leaders, and civic organizations reaching out to express their pride in having such a distinguished service member as a Westfield resident. The mayor's office had contacted the Williams family about organizing a formal recognition ceremony for Marcus, assuming that his parents would be eager to participate in celebrating their son's achievements. Mrs. Hayes had been among the first to congratulate Patricia on the magazine article and to inquire about when the town would have the opportunity to formally recognize Marcus for his achievements.
Feature, but her comments had carried subtle criticism of the family's previous treatment of Marcus. "I always knew that boy had something special," she had said during an impromptu visit. "It's wonderful to see him getting the recognition he deserves, even if it took a national magazine to make some people notice." The implicit rebuke had not been lost on Patricia, who had begun to understand that her treatment of Marcus had been observed and judged by their neighbors for years. The magazine article had provided these observers with validation of their belief that Marcus possessed qualities that his family had failed to recognize or value. Marcus himself had been unaware of the magazine article until Colonel Chen had congratulated him during a routine meeting at his new assignment. His reaction had been characteristically modest, focusing on the team efforts that had made his individual achievements possible rather than dwelling on the personal recognition. The disconnect between his humble response to praise and his family's previous characterization of him as attention-seeking had become another source of regret for Patricia. The decision to reach out to Marcus had been difficult for Patricia, as it required admitting years of mistaken judgments and dismissive treatment. Her first attempt at contact had been a carefully crafted email that attempted to express pride in his achievements while avoiding direct acknowledgement of her previous failures as a supportive parent. The response she received had been polite but distant, reflecting the emotional distance that had developed between them. Marcus's reply had been brief and professional, thanking her for her message while making no commitment to future communication or visits home. The formal tone had been devastating for Patricia, who had never fully realized how completely she had alienated her younger son through years of criticism and dismissal. The young man who had once sought her approval had clearly moved beyond needing or wanting her validation. Robert's attempt to reconnect with Marcus had been equally unsuccessful, as his phone call had been answered with the same polite professionalism that characterized Marcus's email response to Patricia. The conversation had been brief and awkward, with Robert struggling to find words that could bridge years of misunderstanding and dismissal. His offer to visit Marcus at his new assignment had been politely declined, with Marcus citing security requirements and demanding work schedules. Derek had made his own attempt to contact Marcus, motivated partly by genuine desire to repair their relationship and partly by Amanda's increasing criticism of his family's treatment of his brother. The phone conversation had been longer than his parents' attempts, but had revealed the depth of damage that years of passive acceptance of their parents' attitudes had created in their brotherhood. "Marcus, I've been thinking about everything that's happened," Derek had said, his voice carrying uncharacteristic uncertainty. "I realize I should have stood up for you more, should have recognized what you were achieving instead of just going along with Mom and Dad's opinions." Marcus's response had been measured and thoughtful, acknowledging Derek's attempt at reconciliation while making clear that rebuilding their relationship would require more than a single phone call and a belated apology. The conversation had concluded with Marcus expressing willingness to consider future contact, but emphasizing that his military responsibilities and new assignment would limit his availability for family interactions. The failed attempts at reconnection had forced the Williams family to confront the possibility that the damage to their relationships with Marcus might be irreparable. Years of dismissive treatment and criticism had created emotional distance that couldn't be bridged through sudden recognition of his achievements or belated expressions of pride and support. Amanda's criticism had extended beyond simple disagreement about family dynamics. Her law enforcement background had given her insight into the character required for military service, and she found herself questioning the values and judgment of the family she was planning to marry into. "Derek, I'm having serious concerns about how your family treats people," she had said during one of their increasingly frequent arguments about Marcus. "The way you've all dismissed and criticized someone who has achieved so much through genuine sacrifice and service makes me wonder what other blind spots exist in your family's value system." The implications of Amanda's criticism had extended beyond the specific issue of Marcus's treatment to broader questions about character, empathy, and the ability to recognize worth that didn't conform to narrow definitions of success. Derek had found himself defending family attitudes that he was beginning to recognize as problematic, while simultaneously trying to preserve a relationship that had become increasingly strained. The Veterans Organization had proceeded with their plans to establish a scholarship in Marcus's honor, despite the Williams family's awkward position regarding their son's achievements. The announcement had generated additional media attention and community support, creating ongoing recognition of Marcus that made it impossible for his family to return to their previous pattern of ignoring his military career.
The scholarship committee had requested input from Marcus about the criteria and selection process, leading to correspondence between him and community members that bypassed his family entirely. The direct relationship between Marcus and his hometown supporters had highlighted the Williams family's irrelevance to their son's current life and future plans. Colonel Chen had attended the scholarship announcement ceremony as Marcus's representative, providing detailed information about his military career and achievements that contrasted sharply with his family's previous ignorance. Her presentation had included specific examples of Marcus's innovations, leadership, and service that painted a comprehensive picture of sustained excellence and growing responsibility. The community's embrace of Marcus as a hometown hero had continued to generate recognition and opportunities that reflected genuine appreciation for his service and achievements. Business leaders had expressed interest in consulting with him about leadership and logistics challenges, while civic organizations had requested his participation in youth mentoring programs and career guidance initiatives. Marcus's response to these community outreach efforts had been positive and engaged, reflecting his commitment to service that extended beyond his military duties. His willingness to contribute to his hometown's civic life had stood in marked contrast to his distance from his family, highlighting the selective nature of his withdrawal from Westfield relationships. The success of Marcus's new assignment with General Morrison's staff had been evident in the additional responsibilities and recognition he had received within weeks of beginning his duties. His innovative approaches to strategic planning and interagency coordination had caught the attention of senior defense officials, leading to opportunities for advancement that exceeded even the optimistic predictions in the Military Times article. General Morrison had personally commended Marcus's performance during a high-level briefing attended by Pentagon officials, praising his analytical skills and strategic thinking in terms that suggested continued, rapid advancement. The recognition at such senior levels of military leadership had validated every sacrifice Marcus had made in choosing military service over his family's preferred civilian career path. The announcement of Marcus's promotion to captain had reached Westfield through military channels, providing additional confirmation of his distinguished service and growing responsibilities. The promotion, which typically required several more years
service, had been accelerated based on his exceptional performance and the recommendation of senior officers who recognized his potential for continued advancement. Patricia had learned about the promotion through Mrs. Hayes, who had received the information from her nephew serving in the same military district as Marcus. The secondhand nature of receiving news about her son's achievements had been particularly painful, highlighting the complete breakdown in family communication that her years of dismissive treatment had created. The community celebration of Marcus's promotion had proceeded without family involvement, organized by the Veterans Organization and local civic groups who had embraced him as a symbol of hometown success. The event had featured presentations by military representatives and community leaders who spoke about Marcus's contributions to both military excellence and civilian disaster relief efforts. Derek and Amanda's engagement had been quietly postponed as Amanda struggled with her concerns about the Williams family's values and treatment of Marcus. Her decision to delay their wedding plans had been motivated by deep questions about character and judgment that extended beyond the specific issue of Marcus's treatment to broader concerns about the family's empathy and integrity. The postponement had forced Derek to confront the reality that his family's treatment of Marcus had consequences that extended beyond their relationship with him to affect other important relationships and future plans. The possibility that he might lose Amanda because of his family's failures had been a wake-up call that prompted serious self-reflection about his own complicity in Marcus's mistreatment. Robert's business had experienced unexpected benefits from Marcus's recognition, as several new clients had sought out his services based on their admiration for his son's military achievements. The irony that Marcus's success was contributing to business growth despite Robert's dismissal of military careers had not been lost on him, and it had forced him to reconsider his understanding of how reputation and respect were built within professional communities.
Patricia's involvement with community organizations had become increasingly uncomfortable as Marcus's achievements continued to generate discussion and recognition. Her previous dismissive comments about military service had been remembered and contrasted with the reality of her son's distinguished career, creating awkward situations where her credibility and judgment were questioned. The transformation of Marcus from family disappointment to community hero had been completed without any involvement or support from the Williams family, highlighting their irrelevance to his success and their failure to recognize his potential. The young man who had left home seeking approval had found validation and recognition from strangers who valued his service and achievements. The final confrontation had come when General Morrison himself had called the Williams household, attempting to reach Marcus about an urgent military matter. Patricia had answered the phone and found herself speaking directly with the four-star general whose salute had transformed their understanding of their son's career. General Morrison's polite but pointed questions about why he couldn't reach Marcus through the family contact information had forced Patricia to admit that they had little communication with their son and no current details about his contact preferences. The conversation had concluded with the general expressing surprise at the family's disconnection from Marcus, such a distinguished officer, and suggesting that they might want to reconsider their priorities. The call from General Morrison had served as a final wake-up call for the Williams family, demonstrating that their treatment of Marcus had been noticed and judged by senior military leadership. The general's surprise at their disconnection from Marcus had highlighted the abnormal nature of their family dynamics.
The consequences of their years of dismissive treatment. Marcus's continued success and advancement within military circles had proceeded entirely without family involvement or support, proving that he had found the recognition and validation he had sought through his own merit and dedication. The young man who had once hoped for his parents' approval had built a distinguished career surrounded by colleagues and superiors who valued his contributions and supported his continued growth. The story had concluded with Marcus achieving everything he had sought when he first enlisted, while his family remained on the outside of his success, having forfeited their opportunity to share in his achievements through their own choices and attitudes. The recognition he had earned from General Morrison and the military community had replaced any need for family validation, providing him with the respect and appreciation that had always been available to those willing to see his worth. The ripple effects of General Morrison's phone call had spread through the Williams household like a shockwave, creating a crisis of conscience that forced each family member to confront the magnitude of their misjudgments. Patricia had spent sleepless nights replaying years of dismissive comments and missed opportunities to support her son, while Robert struggled with the realization that his business-focused worldview had blinded him to genuine achievement and character. Derek had taken the most decisive action in response to the family's crisis, driving 8 hours to Marcus's new base without announcement or invitation. The decision had been impulsive, motivated by a desperate desire to salvage what remained of their brotherhood and to somehow make amends for years of passive complicity in their parents' treatment of Marcus. Amanda had supported the trip while expressing skepticism about its potential success, given the emotional distance that had developed between the brothers. The base security procedures had been Marcus's first indication that Derek was attempting an unscheduled visit, as the military police had contacted him to verify whether he wanted to authorize his brother's entry to the installation. The surprise in Marcus's voice had been evident even through the formal military communication protocols, but he had agreed to meet with Derek in the base visitor center under the supervision of security personnel. The reunion between the brothers had been awkward and stilted, with years of unresolved tension creating barriers that neither man seemed capable of immediately overcoming. Derek had prepared an extensive apology during his drive, but when faced with Marcus in his military uniform, surrounded by the symbols of the career he had helped dismiss, the words had seemed inadequate and self-serving.
Marcus had appeared older and more authoritative than Derek remembered, carrying himself with the confidence and bearing of an officer accustomed to responsibility and respect. The transformation from the uncertain young man who had left home 8 years earlier to the accomplished professional sitting across from him had been striking and somewhat intimidating for Derek to witness. "I read the Military Times article," Derek had begun, his voice carrying none of the easy confidence that typically characterized his interactions with family members. "I had no idea about any of it. The Bronze Star, the combat deployments, the recognition from senior leadership. Mom and Dad never told us about any of your actual achievements." Marcus's response had been measured and professional, reflecting the emotional distance he had created to protect himself from continued family disappointment. "They never asked about my actual service, Derek. Every conversation we had focused on when I was going to leave the military and do something they considered worthwhile. It became easier to just stop sharing details about my career." The conversation had revealed the depth of miscommunication and willful ignorance that had characterized the family
relationship with Marcus for years. Derek had assumed that their parents' dismissive attitude reflected accurate information about Marcus's military performance, while Marcus had interpreted his family's lack of interest as confirmation that his achievements were meaningless to them. "I should have asked you directly," Derek had admitted, his voice carrying genuine regret. "I should have made my own judgments instead of just accepting Mom and Dad's version of your military service. I realize now that I don't know anything about what you actually do or what you've accomplished." Marcus had spent the next hour providing Derek with a comprehensive overview of his military career, describing his responsibilities, deployments, and the evolution of his expertise in logistics and strategic planning. The detailed explanation had revealed a level of complexity and responsibility that Derek had never imagined, challenging every assumption he had held about military service and its demands. The discussion of Marcus's combat experience had been particularly illuminating for Derek, who had never fully understood the courage required for deployment to active conflict zones. Marcus's matter-of-fact description of dangerous situations and life-threatening conditions had highlighted the fundamental difference between his chosen career path and Derek's comfortable civilian existence. "The Bronze Star was for actions during a rocket attack on our forward operating base," Marcus had explained, his tone remaining professionally neutral despite the intensity of the subject matter. "Our supply depot was hit, and we had wounded personnel trapped in the damaged building. I coordinated the evacuation while maintaining critical supply operations under fire. It wasn't heroic, it was just doing my job under difficult circumstances." Derek's understanding of heroism and professional dedication had been fundamentally altered by this conversation, as he realized that Marcus's modest description actually represented exactly the kind of courage and selflessness that defined genuine heroism. The contrast with his own risk-averse approach to life and career had been humbling and uncomfortable. The meeting had concluded with Marcus agreeing to maintain limited contact with Derek while making clear that rebuilding their relationship would require sustained effort and genuine change in family attitudes. The conditional nature of this reconciliation had reflected Marcus's hard-won understanding that his emotional well-being required protection from further family disappointment and criticism. Derek's return to Westfield had been followed by difficult conversations with his parents about the reality of Marcus's military career and their failure to recognize his achievements. The detailed information Derek had gathered during his visit had forced Patricia and Robert to confront the magnitude of their ignorance and the consequences of their dismissive treatment. Patricia's emotional response to learning about Marcus's combat experience had been particularly intense, as she realized that her son had faced life-threatening situations while she had been criticizing his career choice as meaningless. The recognition that Marcus had risked his life in service to his country while his own mother had dismissed his dedication as attention-seeking had been devastating for her self-image as a caring parent. Robert's reaction had been more complex, involving both guilt about his treatment of Marcus and grudging admiration for achievements that he was finally beginning to understand.
The detailed explanation of Marcus's responsibilities and recognition had forced him to reconsider his assumptions about military careers and their value compared to civilian business success. He's achieved more real leadership responsibility at 26 than most people ever have in their entire careers, Robert had admitted to Patricia during one of their late-night discussions about Marcus. While I was criticizing his choice to serve, he was actually building exactly the kind of character and competence that I claim to value.
Business. The family's collective guilt had been compounded by the continuing community recognition of Marcus's achievements, which served as constant reminders of their failure to support and celebrate their own son. The scholarship program established in his honor had attracted donations from across the region, with contributors specifically noting their admiration for Marcus's service and their desire to encourage other young people to follow his example. Amanda's decision to postpone her engagement to Derek had been motivated by deeper concerns about character and values that extended beyond the specific issue of Marcus's treatment. Her law enforcement background had given her insight into the importance of integrity and moral courage, qualities that she had found lacking in the Williams family's response to Marcus's military service. Derek, I need to understand how a family can be so completely wrong about someone for so long, she had explained during one of their discussions about their relationship's future. This isn't just about not appreciating Marcus's military career. It's about a fundamental failure to see character and worth when it was right in front of you. That makes me question other judgments and values. The postponement had forced Derek to confront the possibility that his family's treatment of Marcus reflected deeper character flaws that might affect his own worthiness as a partner. The comfortable assumption that his parents' approval indicated moral superiority had been shattered by their complete misjudgment of Marcus, leading Derek to question other family beliefs and attitudes. Marcus's continued advancement within military circles had proceeded without any family involvement, as he had built professional relationships and earned recognition through his own merit and dedication. His assignment to General Morrison's staff had led to additional opportunities for strategic planning and interagency coordination that showcased his unique abilities and potential for future leadership. The announcement of Marcus's selection for the Command and General Staff College had represented another milestone in his military career, indicating that senior leadership viewed him as officer material destined for significant future responsibilities. The competitive nature of the selection process had made his acceptance particularly meaningful, as it reflected sustained excellence over multiple years of service. Colonel Chen had personally congratulated Marcus on his selection, noting that his acceptance into the Staff College program virtually guaranteed promotion to major and positioned him for potential selection for battalion command within 5 years. The trajectory of his career had exceeded all initial expectations, validating every sacrifice he had made in choosing military service over his family's preferred civilian path. The Staff College assignment had required Marcus to relocate once again, this time to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, where he would spend a year studying advanced military strategy, joint operations planning, and senior leadership principles. The academic rigor of the program had been designed to prepare selected officers for the complex challenges of senior military command and strategic decision-making. Marcus's departure for Fort Leavenworth had been marked by a farewell ceremony attended by colleagues, superior officers, and community members who had come to respect and admire his service. The event had been organized without family involvement, reflecting the complete separation between Marcus's professional life and his family relationships that had developed over years of mutual misunderstanding. General Morrison personally attended Marcus's farewell ceremony, using the occasion to deliver remarks about the importance of recognizing and nurturing exceptional military talent.
His comments had included specific praise for Marcus's innovative approaches to logistics management and his potential for future senior leadership responsibilities. Lieutenant Williams represents exactly the kind of officer our military needs.
For the challenges of the 21st century, General Morrison had stated during his remarks, his combination of technical expertise, strategic thinking, and genuine concern for the welfare of personnel under his command makes him invaluable for future leadership roles. The Army is fortunate to have officers of his caliber and character. The general's public endorsement of Marcus's potential had been reported in military publications and local media, creating additional recognition of his achievements and future prospects. The contrast between this high-level professional validation and his family's continued disconnection had highlighted the complete reversal of his early hopes for family approval and support. Maria Rodriguez had also attended the farewell ceremony, using the opportunity to reflect on their friendship and Marcus's growth as a leader since their first meeting years earlier. Her observations about his character and professional development had provided insight into the qualities that had earned him recognition from senior military leadership. Marcus has always been someone who puts mission success and personnel welfare ahead of personal recognition, Maria had noted during her remarks at the ceremony. His willingness to take on difficult challenges and find innovative solutions has made him invaluable in every assignment he's undertaken. The military is better because of officers like him. The ceremony had concluded with presentations of commendations and expressions of confidence in Marcus's future success from multiple senior officers who had worked with him during his assignment to General Morrison's staff. The unanimous praise and recognition had demonstrated the respect he commanded within military circles and the investment that senior leadership had made in his continued development. Marcus's arrival at Fort Leavenworth had been met with immediate recognition of his reputation and achievements, as his selection file had preceded him and created expectations for exceptional performance during the Staff College program. His fellow students had included officers from all service branches, many of whom had also achieved distinction in their respective careers and specialties. The academic rigor of the Command and General Staff College had been designed to challenge even the most accomplished officers, requiring mastery of complex strategic concepts, joint operations planning, and advanced leadership principles. Marcus's background in logistics and strategic planning had provided him with advantages in certain subject areas, while challenging him to develop new competencies in others. His performance during the initial weeks of the program had been exceptional, earning recognition from instructors and respect from fellow students who quickly identified him as one of the most capable officers in their class. The competitive academic environment had brought out the best in Marcus's analytical abilities and strategic thinking, confirming the wisdom of his selection for the program. The Williams family had learned about Marcus's assignment to the Command and General Staff College through community sources rather than direct communication, highlighting the continued breakdown in family relationships that their years of dismissive treatment had created. The significance of his selection had been explained to them by Mrs. Hayes, whose military family connections had provided her with insight into the competitive nature of the program. Patricia's emotional response to learning about Marcus's latest achievement had been complicated by recognition that she was receiving information about her son's career milestones secondhand from neighbors, rather than directly from Marcus himself. The realization that she had become irrelevant to her son's life had been particularly painful, as it represented the natural consequence of years of dismissive treatment and criticism. Robert's attempt to contact Marcus at Fort Leavenworth had been unsuccessful, as Marcus had not provided his family with current contact information and had established clear boundaries about communication.
Communication that reflected his need to protect himself from further disappointment. The formal nature of Robert's inquiry through official military channels had been met with polite but distant responses that maintained professional courtesy while avoiding personal engagement. Derek's efforts to maintain the limited contact that Marcus had agreed to during their meeting had been more successful, but the relationship remained strained and conditional. Their occasional phone conversations had focused primarily on Marcus's professional activities and achievements, with personal topics carefully avoided to prevent reopening emotional wounds that had taken years to develop. Amanda's decision about her engagement to Derek had remained unresolved as she continued to process her concerns about the Williams family's character and values. Her conversations with Derek about his family's treatment of Marcus had revealed patterns of judgment and behavior that raised broader questions about empathy, integrity, and the ability to recognize worth in forms that differed from conventional expectations. The community's continuing celebration of Marcus had proceeded without family involvement, as local organizations and veterans groups had embraced him as a symbol of hometown success and military excellence. The annual scholarship dinner held in his honor had become a significant community event, drawing attendance from regional military leadership and business executives who wanted to associate themselves with Marcus's achievements. The scholarship program had funded educational opportunities for several local students pursuing military careers, with recipients specifically noting Marcus's example as inspiration for their own service commitments. The positive impact of his recognition had extended beyond personal validation to create tangible benefits for other young people seeking to follow similar paths of service and dedication. Marcus's academic performance at the Command and General Staff College had continued to exceed expectations, earning him selection for additional specialized training programs that would further enhance his qualifications for senior leadership positions. His thesis research on innovative logistic strategies in joint operations had attracted attention from Pentagon planners who were seeking solutions to complex operational challenges. The recognition of Marcus's academic work had led to opportunities for consultation on real-world military problems, providing him with experience in strategic planning at levels typically reserved for much more senior officers. The trust and responsibility that had been placed in him had reflected the confidence that senior leadership held in his analytical abilities and judgment. General Morrison had maintained periodic contact with Marcus throughout his time at Fort Leavenworth, monitoring his progress and providing mentorship that reflected the general's investment in Marcus's future success. Their conversations had focused on career planning, leadership development, and the strategic challenges facing the military in an increasingly complex global environment. Marcus, you have the potential to make significant contributions to military leadership for decades to come, General Morrison had observed during one of their conversations. Your combination of operational experience, analytical skills, and genuine concern for personal welfare positions you perfectly for the senior leadership challenges our military will face in the coming years. The general's continued mentorship had provided Marcus with insights into strategic decision-making and senior leadership responsibilities that would prove invaluable as his career progressed. The relationship had also demonstrated the kind of professional support and recognition that had replaced his early hopes for family approval and validation. Marcus's graduation from the Command and General Staff College had been marked by academic honors and selection for immediate promotion to major, reflecting his exceptional performance throughout the program. The promotion had been accompanied by assignment to a prestigious position within the Pentagon's Strategic Planning Division, representing another significant milestone in his rapid career advancement. The Pentagon assignment had required security clearances and responsibilities that reflected the highest levels of trust and confidence from senior military leadership. Marcus's role in strategic planning for future military operations had positioned him at the center of critical national security decisions, providing him with experience and exposure that would shape his understanding of military leadership at the highest levels. The Williams family had learned about Marcus's promotion and Pentagon assignment through media coverage rather than personal communication, highlighting the complete separation between his professional success and family relationships. The recognition that their son had achieved positions of significant national responsibility while maintaining no meaningful contact with them had been devastating for Patricia and Robert. The community's response to Marcus's latest achievements had been overwhelmingly positive, with local media featuring stories about the hometown hero who had risen to positions of influence within the Pentagon. The coverage had consistently portrayed Marcus as a role model for young people and a source of pride for the Westfield community, creating additional pressure on his family to acknowledge their misjudgments.
Marcus's success had been achieved entirely through his own merit and dedication, supported by mentors and colleagues who recognized his potential and invested in his development. The young man who had left home seeking approval had found validation and recognition in abundance within military circles, proving that respect could be earned through character and competence rather than family connections or inherited advantages. The story of Marcus Williams had become a testament to the power of persistence, character, and the pursuit of excellence in environments where merit was valued and recognized. His journey from family disappointment to military leader had demonstrated that worth could be found and celebrated by those capable of recognizing genuine achievement and dedication to service.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.